Welcome everyone to this pilot episode of On the Ground. My name is Benjamin King and I'm joined here today with Kathy Jiang from Kathy Tax, who's come up from Dongguan to film this with us here in Guangzhou. Today we're going to talk about the 4 different ways that you can hire here on the ground in China. Number 1, setting up your own entity. Number 2, setting up a representative office. Number 3, hiring a contractor. And number 4, using an employer of record. Listen in where we do a deep dive and compare the pros and cons of each method and which method might be the best option for you. So Kathy, why don't you tell us and the audience a bit more about yourself and your business and experience?
Sure, thanks, Ben. Hello, it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm Kathy Zhang. I'm the founder and CEO of Kathy Accounting Firm. I worked in a Chinese local accounting firm for 8 years and became a senior tax consultant and partner. Then I joined Mango China, a renowned Spanish fast fashion company. I started as the CFO in Shenzhen and later moved to Shanghai. After that, I came back to South China and set up my own firm. We provide one-stop services to foreign invested companies, including business setup, accounting, tax, HR, payroll, and legal secretarial services. Now we have been running the firm for 12 years with a team of 16 people. With more than 20 years of experience, I have gained a lot of useful knowledge in this field. Today, I'm truly delighted to have this chance to share my expertise with all the audience here.
So thank you, Kathy, for that. I mean, to be honest, one of the reasons why I wanted to start this episode with you is because of your extensive experience. And also, we regularly have great chats, conversations about different challenges that we have as a business in China, in terms of HR and accounting and tax. And we've always been very good at explaining some of the nuances and tricky things in China. So thank you very much for coming today. And it's also interesting, to hear of your experience both internally working inside Mango as a CFO of a big multinational firm, but then also a lot of experience externally helping different kinds of companies. So, and what are the types of companies that you mainly deal with at the moment?
Currently, we mainly deal with the foreign invested companies. From these companies made from America and Europe. These are the biggest part of my client base.
Okay, brilliant. And today, obviously, this pilot episode, we're really excited about it. So, if you want to see more of these, hopefully you can like and subscribe wherever you're watching this. And the reason why we've started with this topic, the 4 ways to effectively hire your team in China, is because we really want to help businesses avoid some of the risks and pitfalls of having a presence on the ground. And so I just wanted to start with a bit of a story. It's actually a true story, and then we can discuss it and then see how we go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so here it is. Imagine trusting someone on the ground in China to manage your suppliers. Someone you rely on completely. You're paying them well. They're handling purchase orders, keeping an eye on your quality, communicating with factories in Chinese, your factories, on your behalf. So everything seems to be going smoothly. But then there's silence. They stop responding to your messages. Calls are ignored. Emails are left unanswered. That's exactly what happened to one of our clients when they came to us. They were in the iPhone and iPad case business with suppliers in South China. Their local team member, someone that they'd been working with for years, suddenly became impossible to reach. Worried about this, they decided to bypass her and contact the supplier directly about their latest orders. And this was a new supplier that had been sourced by this person. But that's when things unraveled. That supplier had no idea about these orders or anything that he was talking about. So it turns out that these orders didn't actually exist, or rather they had been rerouted, diverted to a different supplier. Tens of thousands of purchase orders worth tens of thousands of dollars diverted to a company, a factory that they'd never even heard of. Their trusted team member, who knows, likely to be taking a kickback. This is a nightmare scenario that for any business working in China, but it's more common than we might think. So, what are your thoughts about that, Kathy?
Okay, thank you for introducing this story. I think this might be very typical and also sounds very, very disappointing. I know that I can understand the foreign company must be hurt very deeply. So I think the key point here for this, why this kind of case happened, one of the key point is that you can see this person, this contractor, and the foreign company, their legal bond here, the relationship is pretty loose in this story, right? So that makes this contractor has no fear of legal consequences if they do something wrong.
Yeah.
So if for the foreign company, when they hired this contractor, when they create some sort of a China employment relationship with the employee, I think the employee will respect more about the company rule, about all the business routines, and such kind of things will not happen because there is always legal consequence.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, for us, as an employer of record, employing people on the ground, we see that the relationship between the labor relationship is so much deeper than just a contract. We register their social insurance, we bind their social insurance, and we're paying into their accounts. We have to get all of their documentation, their ID card, their hukou. The hukou is almost like their sort of passport, sort of domestic passport, really. There's so much information about them that it makes it almost impossible for them to disappear. And and it does happen, like people do just disappear, and like this case had. So, I really believe that this kind of scenario can be prevented by hiring someone on the ground securely and compliantly. So, with that in mind, let's go through the four main methods, key methods of how to hire someone on the ground. Method number one, setting up your own foreign invested enterprise, or FIE or a WFOE. So, this is the first and most official way to hire in China is setting up your own company. This means you establish a legal entity and hire the staff directly. So, Kathy, why don't you just give us an overview of what this means and maybe some of the advantages of doing it like this?
Sure. Okay, the WFOE, WFOE, it stands for Wholly Foreign Owned Enterprise. It is actually a limited company. And this company, in this case, we're talking about for the sourcing activity, actually this WFOE is going to be a service company. And this company will charge a service fee from the overseas mother company to support the operation here. To set up this WFOE, there are several pros we can consider comparing with the second entity, the second option we are going to talk about. Actually, to set up a WFOE, there is a lower tax cost. And once you set up, you can hire the Chinese employees directly. No need to go through any agency. So that means the employment of each employee will be directly under WFOE's name. And also WFOE is quite flexible. If in the future the company wants to do any kind of trading or activity or import and export, the company can do it, no problem. Just maybe expand the business scope. So from the efficiency point of view, WFOE is a good choice.
Yeah, I mean, setting up your own company, all cards on the table is the most direct way and compliant way to employ people on the ground. And like you mentioned about the business license, you know, why are you hiring someone on the ground? Yeah, if you can make it like a service company and you're sourcing, that's great. But you might actually need a license for whatever your people you're going to employ is going to do. So, like you said, import export or some more logistics related, or indeed if you're planning on selling something in China, to issue VAT receipts, etc. You need a business to do that. So it is a sort of a go-to solution for hiring in China, and there are lots of people promoting this as a solution to set up a company in China. But I do want to let's talk about some of the key points that people really should understand about that. And I guess I do think it's gotten a lot easier in the last sort of 10, 15 years to open up a company. But I do feel that not enough is shared about the costs of operating and maintaining a company. I know, we know that we have to do tax filing every month.
Right.
There are, one of the experiences that I've had, around the registered address is tricky.
Yeah.
How if you need to change your office, then your registered address must go with you, and and lots of places don't accept it. Like this building that we're in now, you can't register your address here. I think the costs, like on paper, from initially, it seems quite cost effective, but I also think like the costs just add up. They build up.
Yes, after you set up the WFOE, you need to pay related expenses to maintain the license. Yeah, like the tax filing, the address. You must have a registration address, and you need to do the annual inspection for the company and audit. And maybe for the mother company will need a audit report from the subsidiary, so that the mother company can do their consolidated accounts.
Yeah, and like there's just so many small examples that I didn't know about before I set up my own company. It's just, even just things like paying your own company. You have, every time you pay into
bank account,
their bank account, you have to fill in a form, and the form doesn't always come up properly, or because of the internet access on the foreign bank is not 100% right. It can be tricky. It's just, it takes up time. There's a lot of administrative parts that just absorb time.
Right.
Yeah, and I sort of feel like you need someone internally to manage the entity. And whereas, if you just want to hire a small team just to, focus on doing the job, like, like sourcing, quality management, then, if they're having to take their time, just dealing with all of this admin, even when you do have support from, a company like yourself, it is quite cumbersome. Which also, brings me on to like the legal rep. I mean, do you want to explain a bit more about a legal rep that's required?
Required by the WFOE, right?
Yes.
Okay. The legal representative is the person's whose name will be showing on the business license, and the legal representative can be a foreigner or can be a Chinese. And this foreigner, if it's a foreigner, the foreigner needn't has to be in China, but in certain stages, the original passport may be needed here in China. For example, if you open the bank account, you need the original passport. And some banks may need the legal representative to come in person as well.
Yeah.
And thinking about the moving forward stage, and sometimes the signature of the legal representative will be needed here, especially for some official papers.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I feel like especially at the moment, my passport travels more than I do. So I know that we'll be having to send it to different locations when we're setting up our branch companies. Speaking of branch companies, another challenge really, and this is particularly to China. I mean, China is a big place. If you want to hire, we set up a company in Guangzhou, but if you want to hire someone in a different city and set up pay their social insurance in that city, you can't use a Guangzhou company to do that. You have to use an entity in that city to hire it, which may mean that depending on who you want to hire, you might need to set up a branch company or outsource your hiring to another company. But if you're setting up the company to hire them in the first place, you can very easily get yourself into this spider web of a mess. So I do think if you're setting up an entity, you really have to have a clear plan of the people, the base, the objective of doing it. And I do think that maybe some people rush into it without truly understanding the commitments. I always think of like the entity setup now is a bit like the marriage situation in China. It's getting easier and easier to get married, easier and easier to set up a company, but it's getting more difficult to divorce. And so for anyone who follows these particular areas of social areas in China and the company itself, I mean, I personally don't have any experience of closing down a company here, but maybe
we do have a lot.
And I mean, how long does it take?
To close a company, usually it takes about 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, of course, the longest part is the tax, the registration. Because the tax bureau will look back on your tax payment history.
Yeah. I think overall, the summary really is like if you have this long-term commitment plan and you have the plan to build your team. I also think if you're going to hire a general manager in China for the sake of the business and a management team in China, then an entity is the way to go. Great. Let's move on to the second option, which is linked to the first option, but it's actually setting up a representative office, an RO, and then using a local HR firm to employ people. I think a lot of people will misunderstand what a rep office or a representative office is. So maybe, Kathy, do you want to give a bit of a background or overview of what a rep office actually is?
Okay, this representative office is like a branch of the foreign company. It's not a legal person entity. It's not an independent one. So that's why this representative office cannot hire Chinese employees directly because they don't have an eligible legal status to hire Chinese employee. So that means for representative office, they must hire the Chinese employees through a qualified HR service agency.
Yeah, and you say they don't have any legal status to employ. But do they have any legal status at all?
They are going to have a business license.
They have a business license?
Yes, but their legal status is not an independent legal person. The company is like a legal person, but the representative office is just a branch.
So it's not like an entity.
Complete, it's not a complete legal person. So that's why RO, representative office, cannot hire Chinese employees directly.
And how about setting up an RO compared to setting up an entity?
So setting up a representative office was pretty popular probably 15 years ago, very popular. Because at that time, to set up a WFOE usually need a very high capital requirement. And actually for hiring a sourcing team here, you don't need to invest so much. So that's why people avoid using a WFOE. Instead, they use a RO because RO is a branch. There's no capital requirement. So to set up the RO, first of all, the foreign company's business license, the in-charge person's passport, and article of association of the mother company, all these kind of business documents needs to be notarized first in the overseas
that's
country,
a big,
in the home country. So that is a big work.
it's a lot bigger work than it sounds like. Oh yeah,
Very
we'll just get these
complicated.
notarized, but
Yeah.
you know, especially when you're working with a larger company.
And another thing is, not only the first time when you set up, you need the notarization.
Oh, you have to do it every year, don't you?
Yes, you have to do it every
So
year.
the mother company's documents need to
Yes.
be notarized every year.
Yes, to just to prove that the mother company is still existing.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the requirement for ROs.
It's amazing though, isn't it? I mean, it also just highlights the sort of the gap between the way things work outside of China
That's
and
true.
also
That's
inside
true.
of China.
So you can see that comparing with WFOE, RO has really not. RO is really not so convenient when it comes to the annual maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs more work.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, it's like you can't actually hire the people.
Right.
You can't actually employ them with the
Yeah, the
repo.
purpose
So
for you to set up the entity is to hire the people, but you cannot hire them directly.
So then you have to outsource it to a professional employment organization, a PEO. Yeah, and I mean, how about shutting it down? I mean,
Shutting it down is similar like a WFOE.
oh, right.
Of course, to shut down a WFOE or a ROU, first of all, you need to settle the severance to all the employees first, and then you go through the tax deregistration process.
And can you explain a bit to me about the tax element of the RO?
Okay. So also for RO has a pretty comparably higher tax cost. We have had a calculation, and the comprehensive tax cost of RO is about 5.7% based on the RO expenses.
Yeah, so that's a 5.7% tax based on the cost, not based on the profit.
And not based on the profit, based on the cost, because RO is cost-based. All the taxes are based on the expenses. And this percentage calculation is based on the certain volume of the business. RO is a small-scale taxpayer. If RO upgrade to a general VAT taxpayer, the tax cost will be even higher. It will go up to about 11%.
Yeah, so and that's if the cost center, the costs of operating it exceeds 5 million RMB. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which is possible if you have a team. If you have a you have a team of 10 people with maybe with a couple of foreigners, an office and equipment to maintain here in China, that could exceed 5 million.
Right.
And then you could be paying
this 5 million does not refer to the expenses. It refers to the deemed income of RO. So it includes the expense plus the deemed profit. The deemed profit is 15% of the expenses.
So it's the expense. So the 5 million is the expenses. So the total expense of the company plus the deemed profit of the company.
Right.
So then you add 15%.
Yes, 15%.
And then the total volume is then of that. The total figure there is then taxed.
Yes.
So if you had expenses of $100,000 and then the deemed profit being 15,000.
Will be a bit more than that. The actual calculation is in a different way.
Okay.
Yes. So it will be more than just now the base is 10,000.
100,000.
100,000. So the profit is going to be more than 15,000.
Okay.
A bit more than 15,000.
And then, but then that total amount, then you get taxed on that.
Yes, the VAT will be based on the total of the total income, and the corporate income tax will be based on the deemed profit.
Yeah. So so the tax related is much higher than an entity.
Yes. And instead, WFOE has a pretty lower tax cost. So if we take the same base, like the expenses of the entity, as an example, WFOE's tax, the total tax, comprehensive one, is about 2.2% of the expenses, which is much lower.
Yeah, yeah, that is a lot. Yeah, it's a lot lower and a lot more convenient. And do you get people who still have this misunderstanding now? Like, they think maybe they read online, I need a rep office, but actually what they need is an office that represents their company, as opposed to a representative office, which is is a certain type of structure. Yeah, that's because that can be quite misleading, because an office that represents you on the ground it could be better done in a different way, like setting up an entity. And we were just we were chatting earlier, like scenarios where a rep office might actually make sense. I mean, one of the things I thought of is maybe for some type of NGO or non-profit or a charity.
Yeah, that's true.
That needed someone on the ground. They might not want to set up a limited company. Yeah.
Or it is not able to allow them to set up a legal entity here. They can consider.
Exactly.
They can rep office may be their only choice.
Yeah, exactly. So it is an option. Cumbersome and expensive
even for banks.
Yeah,
even
for banks. Yeah,
before they really have the bank, the operation permit.
That's true. They're not going to set up an entity because they can't perform any banking things, and if they hire people who are sort of going to, provide like advisory, like sort of maybe financial advisory as well. There are probably, I guess, a lot of restrictions around what you can and cannot do under your service scope. So if they want people here. Yeah. And there's also restrictions on what people can actually do, isn't it?
RO is a non-profitable organization.
Yeah.
So you cannot do profitable activity.
Yeah.
So it's their work, the team's work here is only related with the mother company's job.
Right, absolutely. Okay. Great. Well, let's move on. But first, let's have a bit of a break, shall we?
Sure.
Yeah. See you soon. So welcome back to On the Ground. We're here with Kathy Zhang, and so far we've been through two key structural ways of hiring people on the ground here in China. So setting up a WFOE, foreign invested entity, and also a rep office. Now we have two more. So let's go on to number 3, which is, like we discussed in our nightmare scenario earlier, contracting with personnel. So that means hiring them hiring talent as an independent and signing a contractor. So this is different to having a labor relationship, a full-time employee relationship. So I think let's start a bit more about the benefits of doing this. I mean, in many ways it can seem lower risk and with a lot of greater flexibility.
Yeah, if you got a good person, okay, this way can work, no problem, and also with a very minimum cost, because you don't have China presence, so you have no China cost. You only pay the salaries to this person, right? And this person will take care of everything. So for the foreign company, it's the lowest cost solution.
Yeah, and you can be more flexible with how you pay them as well. You could have terms. When you employ someone, it is there is a payroll, and you should pay them on time. Whereas you can be a little bit more flexible depending on who you're working with, I guess. There's no complex setup, like you said. There's no presence here in China, and also terminating a contract is normally very simple.
Very simple, because there's no banding of labor law.
Yeah.
So it's just a commercial service agreement. So you can both decide how you are going to terminate the contract.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point. Is a contract with a person as an independent is not under labor law. It's under what type
It's
of law?
under the civil code.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's under the civil code, and it's
China.
two different laws, and two different relationships. Even though it's an individual, but there are different requirements and different parts to that. But as we spoke earlier, that also means that the individual themselves have more flexibility as well.
Yes.
And they're not. Contractors are not exclusive to your company. You're not employing them full time. You might not have all these rules. So their loyalty and commitment.
Right.
They might have other things going on, and they might not be there for you. At the right time. And so, and I think there are definitely. I also think for people who I hope are watching this, there are loads of companies who just engage people. Sign a consultancy contract and they just pay them every month.
Yes.
But
it's still a very popular, solution for nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that you mentioned, if we've got the right person, I think that helps a lot because the right person is willing to be a contractor. They're willing to be paid in that way. But I do think that a lot of the talent in China would prefer to be employed. Don't you think?
Yes, actually for the person itself, I think usually they may prefer to be employed by somebody and also under a China employment system because this will be more proactive.
Yeah, there's a lot more structure.
Yeah.
I do think really I do think Chinese people, they like structure, especially within their work. I mean, one area that I've always thought as well is like if you have a mortgage, I mean, an employment relationship makes sort of buying property and a mortgage a lot more straightforward. Instead of having some company overseas, which like you discussed, like there's there's a massive gap between what's recognized overseas and what's recognized here on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just going back to an advantage, I guess, is the way that a contractor. It's very difficult for a contractor to sue a foreign company or to file.
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard because the entity is not located in China. Even for the China court, it's hard for them to fight this company.
Yeah. So there is. So in a way, that does make it does lower the risk for the foreign company, but at the end of the day, you're trying to build a relationship and having something long term with your team on the ground. So yes, it's lower risk, but the individual will not be as secure, and they will not feel as secure as well. There is something a bit more special
there
about
will be
a
lack of a sense of belonging.
Exactly. It's that sense of belonging. I've always found that as an employer of record, hiring people here, just even though we're employing them for our clients, they have this element of a central, sort of a center of gravity that we engage with them, and they don't feel so sort of alienated from their teams who they're actually working with, thousands of miles away. I also think, in a way, it could be more expensive. We've got an example, from a day rate point of view, if you sort of boiled it down to a day rate, if you're paying someone sort of long term and full time, then the day rate could be more expensive. We're working on something at the moment where we have a potential contractor, who might work on a client project for a period of time. Their day rate is almost double than for their CV and their experience. It's almost double what if we were going to go to the market and employ someone full time and put that out as a job. But since he's a contractor, he's more expensive. So
right. Yeah, because they will consider their own costs, such as the social insurance.
There's the social insurance,
and also the tax. All this, because all the cost will be on them. So when they quote to the foreign company, they will consider these factors, and the charge must be higher than just the quote for the salary.
Yeah. And also, and also because of the risk element as well.
Yeah.
There is slightly higher risks. It could be only for a short period of time. But also, how about actually paying this consultant from overseas? I mean, we all know of, currency challenges in China. Is it easy to pay them?
Of course, first of all, the contractor must have a China bank account, and they can receive money from overseas by foreign currency, but they need to further provide supporting documents to their bank to convert foreign currency to RMB. And also in China, there's foreign exchange supervision. So for each person, every year they have a quota of conversion by 50,000 US dollar per year. So for those people who is earning higher than this amount, that means they cannot convert to RMB.
So that's both
completely.
ways. Yeah, because here on the
both
ground,
ways.
we always hear about the challenges of converting RMB to USD, but it's actually the same the other way around as well.
Right. If you want to go abroad and you want to, for individual person, also for each person is 50,000 US dollar quota for you to buy the foreign currency.
But then, like you said, the other way around, if you want to receive.
Yeah, receive is the same.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the person must be familiar and must solve this problem dealing with the bank to provide proper supporting documents. Otherwise, the bank will not let you to receive the money from overseas.
Yeah, which is a lot of admin. And if you're essentially trying to hire this person on the ground to work for you, and this is what we're really talking about here today, there's just quite a lot of work that time that they need to spend to deal with that.
Right.
When they're not working in the factories, working for the company. And I just think that's the other thing about the the employment relationship is that the company sort of takes care of almost everything. A bit like in other countries, like it's pay as you earn. So you pay the tax as you go along. The company withholds it and pays it for you. Whereas they have to pay the tax on their own.
Right. So under this case, the person himself must take care of everything.
Yeah.
Including the tax filing of his own income, including his social insurance, housing fund, and also dealing with the bank about the money, the incoming money.
Yeah. And they will pay their own social insurance and housing fund, which is their the personal contribution, but they won't get any contribution from the company side.
Right, they won't. Under this case, for a freelancer, they can do it this way. But actually, they are paying most part of the company part.
Oh,
the
really?
company
So it's
to
almost
pay.
like that when they're paying the social insurance,
Yes.
they're sort of paying the company part and the personal part.
And of course, the percentage of the company part is a bit lower comparing with the company part under a real company
that makes sense.
structure, but they are still paying that part.
And so if you've got the right person who's willing to do all of this and they've got it set up, then that's it, it's okay. But then if you are trying to recruit someone,
and some contractors may just the social insurance and housing fund are supposed to be taken care of by themselves, but some people they may not do it at all.
Yeah.
And also this may happen with the tax filing as well. They don't do anything about it. So that create another thing, that is the risk.
Yeah, and so the risk, they can't really go back to the foreign company for that risk, but it does mean that if they're not doing it properly, then they will have a risk, which will then maybe lead to business continuity.
Right.
I mean, who knows? The individual in our story, maybe she had that problem. So who knows? So if it's not dealt with properly, then it might take more time for them to deal with it, or they might have fines, which puts them under pressure. So you have the right person, fine. But when it comes to recruiting, what I found is I think a lot of the talent would want to be employed. So, and offering consultancy contracts means that you're missing out on most, a big proportion of the talent here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So let's move on.
Sure.
So the fourth and final option, which is all linked to what we're doing here at the China desk, is using an employer of record. So this fourth option is outsourcing your HR to a global employer of record, or an EOR, as it's like to be called. These companies legally employ the staff on your behalf, handling all the payroll, all the taxes, and all of the compliance. So, let's obviously for this a clear benefit is you can employ people not directly, but you can have you can build an employment relationship in China without having to have your own entity, so company here on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, someone else handles it, so it tends to be quicker to set
it's
this up.
quicker and less complicated.
Yeah. So it's not just about the employment contract itself. So they handle all the payroll as well. Even if you set up an entity here, you still need support to do the payroll.
Right.
Either you need to hire someone internally to do it, or you need to work with someone like yourself to calculate the payroll, and it's not that straightforward as we know. So they also will help with all that process as well. But I do think that there are a lot of sort of global employer of record companies out there, and I think there are definitely some challenges and some sort of things that are worth to note when working with these companies. The global employer of record model, I think it actually sort of across the world, globally, expanded massively, especially during COVID and with remote working. So people, companies employing people all over the world, and China was no different in that way. But I think with many cases on employer of records, it's not as transparent as it might seem, or especially compared to an entity.
Right.
I also think that yes, employer of records, they handle all of the HR. That's what they claim. That's what employer of records claim. That's what we claim as an employer of record. But a lot of the time, so it does mean that HR is on autopilot. There's nothing that needs to be done on the HR side. However, my sort of thoughts on this, it's like HR on autopilot until something goes wrong. And like autopilot, when something goes wrong, the pilot needs to take control. However, you're the pilot because they're your employees, and you're sat at the back of the plane and you don't know how to fly the plane. So, it's all very well that payroll and compliance is done, but if there's actually any human HR management where, it could be performance or disciplinary or, breaking of the employee handbook, most employer of records don't really handle with that detailed level, because most employer of records don't really get involved in what the employees are actually doing. It's something that I've realized, which is why we only focus on sort of supply chain and manufacturing. So we can, we work with our clients to try and understand what our employees are actually doing every day, and the types of roles that they're doing, and also work with them to do the HR management. And I think some companies feel like they can just hire these teams on employer of records and then just feel that there won't be any problem. But, I think that's not necessarily the case. But then again, actually, it could be the same with an entity as well. I mean, just because you set up an entity here and you hire people, well, you still need someone to manage the personnel and making sure that that things are running smoothly, right?
Yeah. You hire some agency here. What we can do, the agency can do is to technically help you to complete all the compliance work, right? And also to remind you about what things should be done. But the management of people are still on the client's side.
Yeah, and there's there are just some small bits, like for example, sort of processes. Like the employee just wants to crack on with their job, but are they filing their expenses on time? Are they DACA? Time punching in. Clocking in every day. Are they actually performing their job? And these are the things that still require quite a lot of management on the ground, I'd say. And I think also, employer of records, the costs can rack up as well. It is great for flexibility, but I think some companies charge like a percentage.
Yes.
So if you have a very high salaried position, like a director or some sort of tech manager, then the cost can rack up a lot.
Right.
And also just with a pure numbers. If you have 10, 20, 30 people, then the costs, they can rack up. So another thing about employer of records is actually who is the employer of record. A lot of the times, when we're talking to clients or potential clients and certain people who inquire about our service, is they some of them have employed their team members underneath one of their suppliers. So their employers, so the supplier is actually employing your team member. But I mean, surely that's a bit odd, really.
Right. There's a conflict.
Yeah.
A big conflict, especially if the employees are hired by one of your suppliers, and you just imagine, and this is for the employees, they have some sort of leverage in the hand of the supplier, right?
Yeah, and we talked about earlier is like the labor relationship, the employment relationship is more than just a contract. It's there's something quite binding about it. So actually, if they are being employed by a factory, you've really got to question. It definitely has an impact on their loyalty and commitment.
Sure.
And also just about all these things around employment relationships, around social insurance. If you're employing someone on the ground, you should have an understanding of how all of that works, because these are all really important things, important elements to your employees' life. Social insurance is a huge part of people's lives. And so if you're sort of outsourcing your hiring, especially when you're using a factory, and there's also a chance that they're not paying the social insurance in a compliant way as well.
Right.
So using an employer of record, it should be a reputable one. It should be a company that focuses on this instead of a lot of the time I always hear, oh yeah, we've just got someone to employ our team member and he just pays the payroll. You just put him on our payroll. We'll put him on our payroll. It's just it sounds easy, and the employer record model is designed to be easy, but it should be done in a clear and compliant way.
Right.
Yeah, and particularly with our China desk model, is we're aiming to focus purely on these industries and really understand the challenges of certain employees, like what does a QC engineer do every day, and how do they work, what are their challenges. The same with sourcing and supply chain managers, logistics managers, and that people's work here is so important to them. So really trying to understand what they're doing, and also challenges here on the ground that everyday people face, I think is so important to strengthening that relationship and making sure that the employees they feel supported, that they've got a community around them and people on the ground that they can talk to. A lot of the employer of records can seem quite faceless, and that's something that, at least for us, we're trying to overcome and make sure that we have more than just a payroll relationship. So that's it. The 4 ways of hiring someone on the ground in China. Number 1, setting up a company. Number 2, setting up a rep office. Number 3, hiring someone as a consultant. And number 4, using an employer of record. So, just to summarize, Kathy, can you just give us an overview of each option and maybe what scenario would be best for each option?
Okay. So for the first option to set up a entity, a WFOE, this may applies to more like a foreign company who want to have a stable China sourcing team, and also the size may be a little bit bigger. If it's like that, it's worth doing to set up an entity and hire those people directly under your own entity. Even you need to pay somebody, or for example, pay us to helping you to manage all the technical things like accounting, tax, these kind of things. That's also worth doing. And second, for the representative office, this may, if there's no special case or special requirement, you can avoid it. If it's not like what we mentioned, like an NGO or banks or other industries which really has a difficulty to get their license in China. Otherwise, you needn't choose rep office. And for the contractors scenario, this can be used for the project-based work and short-term ones, or depending, or if you need several people in different places in China, but in short term, you can consider this kind of way. But make sure you make your contract to be more complete and to be more legal binding as well. And for the last one, which is employer of record. So for this one, you can, because it's quite flexible and it can be set up very quickly. So for flexibility purpose, you can use this way. And also if the team is really smaller, you really can think about it. And this is the pretty efficient way to manage. This is my opinion.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that, Kathy. So, the key takeaways, how you hire someone on the ground really depends on your situation. Clearly between a entity and a rep office, in most cases these days, it's better to go for an entity. So don't confuse a rep office with an office that represents you. In all of these different scenarios, wouldn't you agree that the documents and the contracts are absolutely key?
Right.
Yeah, a poorly written contract with a consultant.
It's better to be tailor-made. It's better to be tailor-made to your industry and to your principle or disciplines of the company.
And so no matter which one you choose, even if it's an entity, a poorly written employment contract, an employee handbook is just as risky as maybe using a consultant. Overall, I think most talent in China, they want to have a labor relationship. It protects them. It gives them more security. And therefore, you'll have a lot more choice when recruiting someone here on the ground if you can offer that to them. And despite what people think, the labor relationship can actually protect the company. The employee handbook is such an important document. My employee handbook is over 30 pages long with lots of different guidelines and rules that the employees have to follow. And it also means, these people, they actually work for you and not for themselves, which in China, I think is particularly important. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. And thank you, Kathy, for sharing your experience and your knowledge on all of these different areas.
Thank you, Ben. It's really a pleasure.
And so where can people find you?
Oh, they can visit our website, kathytax.com.
Okay, fantastic. And if you want to find out more about the Kinyu China Desk, then you can search for kinyu.co.uk. And please like and subscribe to this video and watch out for more episodes where we get more guests on and cover more topics on the ground.